So I'm going to start by showing the patterns that's downloadable from the link that I provided. So this one here is for men, so it's marked in English and it's large. So there are some other patterns available, but you guys can take a look. But I picked only two. This is for adult men, this is for adult women. Here is a scale. It's all in centimeters. I will provide the conversions in inches, but this is just an idea. So it's if you print it out from the downloadable, I've already measured it. It's all accurate. So this is usable. One must adjust it obviously to your own size, but I've tested, 5'7", 5'8", about 130-pound female, one Asian, one mixed race, work very well for the female. The male pattern, I noticed that I can come up with more suggestions, but this is the nose. This is where your nose is. This is where your nose is. For male, it seems like if you've got a bigger nose, a Caucasian male, it needs to be out a little bit further, but that's to be adjusted. I want to illustrate, because this is a little confusing, the pattern. I drew a line. So this is, and also the patterns include, in here is both the shell and the lining. That's why it's confusing when cut. So if you were to look at this, this is what I have been able to do, the lining. So I have marked it over this pattern. So if you can take a look, the yellow part here, this is for male lining. So this is how you would cut it. I've already tried to make it a little easier for myself, but this is how I did it. Same thing here. So if you were to cut men's, on the shell, meaning the front, lining is to your mouth, shell is toward the outside. This is, you can cut it this way. So this is where you sew. So this is on the edge. You can sew along this line. It's accurate. So I think the pattern itself is a little confusing. So for women's, it's the same way. So this one is the shell. So I'm marking it here so you can see it clearly, that it really means you cut this on the outside edge, you sew about, they say 1 centimeter, so about that little bit. That's the sew line. So it's a little different from their instructions, but I find that it works. And similarly for, that's the lining, you see. So you take this pattern, this is how you cut. So what I did is I cut them out of little pieces. You can transfer them to a cardboard or something else, but it works this way. Okay. Now I'm showing you how to make the initial cut. So remember, it's wrong side out. So 2 layers of fabric. So I'm showing the women's lining. For white fabric at the inside, and I'm actually coming to the conclusion that it's best actually to use sheets. So I'm going to be purchasing sheets that are wrinkle resistant, because once you put it through the dryer, it kind of wrinkles up, which you can iron out. But I think now I'm thinking ahead, future materials, perhaps it's best to use bed sheets, because those are made to be wrinkle resistant. I'm using 2 kinds of scissors. Either way you can. I have a bit of a head start, so I have this kind of serrated edges, which helps with the fraying. Cut a little bit of extra. Just when you're sewing, you can accommodate some extra stuff, some extra space, mistakes, and all that. So when I cut it, I always make it a little more generous. So that's the shell material. The fabric I'm using here is a bit soft. Look at this top one is harder, so it's a lot easier to sew. But remember, wrong side out, because you need to, once you sew the initial line along the nose, around the center, you need to flip it over and work that way. So it's more important for the shell piece to make sure you get the wrong side out, wrong side up when you cut the fabric pattern. Pin them so that they don't move. So that's one trick I learned. You can iron it if you want to. It's easier. You see the serrated, but I think straight edge knife, it's okay. So you kind of just use your best judgment. You use a little extra. That way, if you need to adjust even for the sizes, it's a little easier to sew outward. So that would be my suggestion. So if you look at this, so eventually you flip it out. So you sew along the edges. So here you begin sewing. So you can sew on that line that you draw, so in this particular case, I'm actually sewing about 1 centimeter in. So this is actually a bigger mass because I try to be a little more generous. But if you want to be precise, I would sew straight along the sew line, which is about 1 inch within the solid line. So you take off the pins and you flip it over. So the way to do it, because you need to, this is what you're going to look in the outside. But when you eventually, when you flip it over, it means that the top and the bottom need to be folded in, the right side in. So if you show it here, so I'm going to have to open up the seams a little bit, just a little bit. I think 1 inch or 2 is more than enough. And then you fold it over, especially the top. If you want to, you can mark the top because the top is not that clear. Sometimes I'd have a double take. I always get them confused. So sometimes I mark it. But so you know what's the top. You see that? The idea is to, you flip open, you fold in the top and sew in. But the top, I give a little bit more generously because you need to put in the wired twist ties. So you sew it in as you sew the top fold. So that's why I'm trying to make it a little broader, a little wider, that way to accommodate mistakes. And you don't want to be sewing the twist ties together because you need to center the twist ties. You see, I fold them in, and then all the way you can sew right through. So this is the beauty of this mask, is it's very easy to sew, only a few sew lines. So here I have 4 inches of plastic twist ties. Plastic is better because it can withstand washing. You can also, for men, I use 5 inches because it's longer and it's easier to adjust. I think it doesn't make that much difference, either 4 or 5. 5 just makes it a little more, a contour. I also use 2 twist ties because I find it's a little more rigid in terms of the tie, in terms of the contour. So you see, you stick the black pieces, the twist ties in there, and then you sew it through. So in the middle, I try to back sew a little bit just to give it a little more integrity, because this side you almost don't have any further reinforcement. So I actually come back a little more to get a little closer, because I noticed that when washing, the twist ties would start to wobble if you leave too big of a pocket, for easy of sewing. But when you wash it, they tend to wobble and move. So I do that. Sometimes I even add a little piece of fabric in the middle if I have time, where my fingers are now on the back side, because that seemed to reinforce it after the wash. It doesn't sort of disappear, or the edges don't fray. So you notch it. You see that? At the end, so you center the wires and you do 2 back and forth small notches right there. So it won't move. So the wires would stay in place. You see that? Back and forth a few times. So that's it. That's the top. So now the bottom, it's very much the same thing, but the bottom is easier because you don't have to sew the wires. You just need to sew a straight line. So it just depends on, I don't think it's that very strict as to how big the mask is. And if it's bigger, it just go under your chin. So I think so long as you can kind of just, eyeball it, do about 1 inch, fold in, not 1 inch, 1 centimeter. That's it. And here, I think you can just go a straight line, because as you show later, there'll be some reinforcement afterwards. So this is it. This is the shell completed. You see, that's another shell that's completed. I'll just show you a couple of examples. So the top is the wire, so you feel it. It's rigid. Okay, so very same for the lining. I do a little back and front because that way the end would stay a little more stable. The stitches won't fall very quickly. So that's a little trick I learned. I'm not a very good sewer, but I learned that if you at the end, at the beginning, if you go do a couple back and forth, the stitches won't come loose. Same idea. So you open the inside. If you can go open all the way in, it's okay. But you fold it the same exact way, and here again, you don't have to worry about the insert. So it's just 2 straight, simple lines. I mean, I do keep in mind trying to keep the bottom, the inside, and the outside even. Just at the end, you don't have a big inside and a small outside. But I don't think at the end of the day, if you're new to sewing and if you're in a hurry, I don't think that precision is as important, as the shell is more a vessel to hold the filter materials. and it, goal is so that it will withstand some washing. So I did some reinforcement in the middle. I think the middle part especially needs some reinforcement. So you can either sew it there, and as I mentioned before, I sometimes even add another strip of fabric just to get the middle part where the seam, the two pieces, the seam come together, the bridge of the nose, reinforced so that it goes through the wash a little easier. But again, it's a personal preference. So there it is. So you see, this is the right side and the wrong side. So this is right side to wrong side. You see, at the end of the day, you have two right side, cotton on right on the inside and the colored fabric on the outside. I pin it in the middle right here. I feel like it's pretty important because you don't want them to move. So I'm pinning the top and the bottom. Not that I need to sew them together, especially in this case, I think it's probably more important to deal with the bottom. So elastic. I suggest that be a little more generous. I measured 5 inches for women. You probably want to do a little more for men because just the face is a little bigger. I find that it's easier, so it's about 21 centimeters that I use. So you cut 2 pieces, and I put a link to the I think it's 1/4 inch flat elastics. It's soft, it's pretty easy. It doesn't withstand the wash that well, but notice that you need to sew it on the shell, on the front of the fabric. So you want to sew together the 2 pieces. So I made the mistake of sewing it on the back. It's very easy to forget that, but sew on the front. You see, you do back and forth a line, and then you put the other side in. Okay, again, back and forth. That's it. And then afterwards, you fold it in. Exactly. So you fold it in to leave enough space so you can thread through a rope, a flat, band like what I'm showing you. This is a bit expensive, the band, because you need about 4.5 feet of materials to tie over your head. So watch out not to, so I don't like to sew the band in first because it's very easy to sew it together. So you want it to be movable. So I would sew it twice because this is the piece, 2 lines. You see, I'm doing front, I'm doing back again because it's after washing, this is the very easiest line to kind of come apart. So I would give it a good sew, 2 lines, 3 lines, so long as you have enough space. You see, there's the elastic. So elastic is just to secure your mask in place. And that, but you don't want it so tight that it rests on your ears and it hurts, so you don't want to wear it for a long time. So I'm making this part a little more generous. The rope is really where you need to tighten, the fit of the mask. And this makes this mask very unique, and I really like it because you get a good seal that other masks, including surgical masks that are sold on the market, just doesn't have this feature. And I think I get a big peace of mind, and the fit is much, much better because of the rope. So you see, I've completed both sides of the pocket, which are fairly generous. And then the next step is to attach. This is the bottom. Okay, this is the bottom, not where your wires are, but the bottom. You do a little rectangular shape, and that works very well because that secures the 2 pieces together and leaves 2 pockets, 2 little openings, so you can pull your materials, the filtering materials, out, so you have a full coverage. You see, so the top is completely open, okay, and the bottom has 2 little pockets open that you can pull the edges of your filtering materials. And then now I show you the rope. Okay, so as I said, I count 4 foot plus half, about 12 inches. And I use a bobby pin, and I actually cut the top of the bobby pin sometimes so it's easier. That little notch, I just cut it off, and it's easy. Yeah, you hook it right through from the bottom. So you hook it through at the bottom, you tie it 2 knots for me, for this kind of materials, okay? So it won't come off. So when you wear it, you can just go from the bottom, 1 swoop. So you cut 1 rope, and that way you can do 2 sides. I find that just saves 1 little bit energy.
We have a filter, the mask, so you just put the filter in here, and then from the bottom pull one corner through. Same thing for the other side. And the filter, you can just either tuck it in to the mask, or you can tuck it over in the inside, though it might be a bit itchy when you wear it. And then to put it on, you just put the strap over your head. And then pull. Adjust the nose strap so that it forms something of a seal around the nose. You can tuck in the corners of the filter and tie